Because it's 11 o'clock, so we can get started. So,
Okay.
so I've got a bit of a thing happening now.
Yeah. That's picking up your familiar. Yeah.
All right, so welcome everyone. Lovely to see you in person. It's always so good. Thank you very much, Andy. We just absolutely love having Queensland Flooring as the exhibitor upstairs, and they do an amazing job. So thank you so much. And we've got about 15 people that have already logged in online, so good to get started. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Karen. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for attending in person. That's very good. Thank you for those people online. It's good to have your attendance as well. And thank you to the Building Design Centre for giving us the opportunity to help with some sort of education with flooring, because the industry has become quite an explosive industry over the last 10 years, where everybody, as the lady just said earlier, there's a lot of fakes out there, and there's some really good fakes and there's some very bad fakes. So we're trying to explain some of the pitfalls and give you some of the understanding to make some informed decisions when you go searching for floors. That's a small picture of our. Are we all good to go on here, Sean? Yeah. Okay, so one of our traders took that just as they were finishing the display upstairs, as Sean said. So that's the display upstairs, which you're welcome to go and have a look at afterwards. And there will be some things that come up in the presentation that will be specific to your probable questions, and there'll be some that won't be. So I will try and skip over a lot of it and not concentrate too much on one single aspect, but we can touch on that afterwards as you as individuals. But that's the shown upstairs. We've got 10 ranges up there of different floors, different floor options, and about 100 plus samples. So really worth a look to consider some of these options that we'll discuss this morning. Okay, so my introduction is going to be fairly short, hopefully, and just give you an idea of what we're trying to touch on today. My objective really is you should go away with an understanding of what you should expect from your flooring, but also the questions you need to ask and question, because it quite often is things that you won't realise that you're being told because you haven't questioned them appropriately as to what the longevity of the floor may give you. Few people we have been come in and say, oh, we don't want that engineered flooring, but engineered flooring can last as long as solid timber flooring, because people don't understand some of the concepts of how the construction is done. So we'll go through that today, this morning, and hopefully you can sort of go away with a little bit more understanding to ask appropriate questions and feel comfortable with the answer you're getting of being what you need. So we're going to basically go through it in this principle. Company profile will be fairly short, just to know where we've come from. Lady asked, were we the real deal? Well, I like to think we're the real deal. We have been around a few years and feel as though we played a part in achieving a lot of those things. As it said up there, established 1992, so we're pushing up to 30 years. I'm 60 next year, and a lot of grey hairs here for the timber flooring industry. There's a lot of worry about your people and your floors, because the fact is there's a lot of issues with timber, especially in the high community that we have been enjoying Queensland. So, quick look at some of the images. That's just shown up on the Sunshine Coast. We've just seen that we've got here in the city centre. And we also have developed a mobile showroom, which squashed up on the image is a little bit squat, but there's 72 samples in there that are decent sizes. A lot of people struggle when you say this is going to be my timber floor and you've got a little bit like this. It's hard to imagine what it really looks like. So these samples here are 1500 by 800. Those are 900 by 600 on the back. So decent sized samples that really give you a better impression of what natural flooring is really like, rather than just one single piece, which doesn't really give you the true picture. Our warehouse, all the timber's held down here in Brisbane, and we distribute from northern New South Wales right up to Harvey Bay and out to Toowoomba. So we cover a fair area. With our lovely supervisors to make sure all the jobs going on are being managed and controlled appropriately. So yeah, so 30 odd years next year and 700 floors a year. So we're doing something right in a 7-year warranty. There's a reasonable understanding of what it actually is required to do a good timber floor. A little bit about the actual sustainability from the industry point of view, so we're interested in the fact we're doing things correctly. The main thing is the summarising sentence on the end, really, the fact that we only use a very small amount of the timber that actually is available. Because people worry about how many trees we're clearing down, we're going to cut all those trees down and make all these things for furniture, for building, for flooring. The reality is we use a very small percentage of the actual forest, and it's the most sustainable resource that we've got for any of the building industry. It's also the cleanest because of all the carbon dioxide it actually takes in and gives us a lifetime of durability and beauty. And there's not really a lot that can go wrong with a timber floor. With all the floors that went through the floods in 10/11 here in Brisbane, still came back good after 3 years of drying out. So very, very resilient. So how's the industry changed over the years? It's changed dramatically. The main change is the fact we no longer build a house as a platform house, if people understand what that means, but we actually build the structure on stilts and bearers, and then we put timber floors on the base of it, and that forms the house floor. And then we put the walls on the top, and then we put the roof on, and everything happens around it. That's how we built in the 1930s up to the sort of 70s. That's how a Queenslander was built. Elevated off the ground on stumps and bearers, and the floor was the floor. Most of it got covered up with lino because they didn't want to see the floor. The floor was just a structural form of actually achieving the result. Now we want to sand it all back and make it look beautiful, so the concepts have changed. And then we introduced this lovely thing called concrete, which obviously has changed the whole building industry over the last 20, 30 years. The particle board that also has been brought in, some people call it yellow tongue or red tongue, but the basic chipboard flooring that's come in to go on top of the joists now, then we put the flooring on top of that timber. So the timber no longer goes in during construction, it goes in after construction, and generally it's all locked up and sealed from the weather, which is great, but it does bring complications with expansion because we know that timber still moves. So what's happened in the industry is the tongue and grooving has actually changed its profiles. So the traditional tongue and groove flooring for people online is essentially divided into 3/3. So you've got the top third, the tongue, and the bottom third. And when we invented this secret nail profile, you'll see by my steel ruler there, there's a slight gap on the bottom shoulder. That in principle is to mean that the top shoulder always comes up nice and tight, so you get your beautifully flat floor, lovely tight joins, because the bottom is a relief to stop it fouling first and stopping the top join going together, which is great. But when it comes under pressure, that bottom join goes up to tighten it, because that then is going to form a slight peak in the floor. So when it tries to take that pressure and go up, then that's when the bottom shoulder takes the pressure and forms a peaking in the floor. Which is why the other one on the left there has actually got a larger top shoulder, because 2/3 of the timber taking the pressure will stay flat. It won't actually peak. But it will push out whatever's in its way. So it'll push out your brick wall, your stone wall, your beautiful bifold doors, it'll push out whatever's in its way. It's about 400 kilos per square metre of pressure when the timber is expanding. And we know it's expanding because it's still living. The tree's passed, but the timber itself is still going to take on all the moisture as we have a high humidity, but it will then go again afterwards. So which is why we have to have expansion joints. So that will come on to. So we look at these other profiles, because we've gone away from now being structural, which means that it has to be 19 millimetres thick. So that 19 millimetres thick means it's structurally able to span across joists. However, with concrete and particle board, we can now use a thinner board, 14 mil, which is a lot less in solid thickness of timber, which means we get more floors out of the same amount of trees, so good for the sustainability, and it doesn't reduce the longevity from your floor. Because the first thing people say, well, I don't want 14 mil, I want 19 mil, because I can sand it more times. But the reality is, if you see the section, we've actually reduced the size of the tongue and the bottom shoulder. So the actual top shoulder here, which is the bit you can sand over the years, is the same size or sometimes more than what the 19 mil is. So the 14 mil has actually become a real solution to help sustain the industry. And also now we don't need to be structural, we can still achieve the longevity that we want. So although it's thinner, You can see by the example on the screen that it still gives that same wear layer. Okay, now we come to the more engineered floors, which aren't hybrids. These are engineered floors, but there is a difference. So you can see the engineered floor here, where we've got a plywood structure in the core. You've also got a difference of the top timber. And you'll learn a new word this morning, it's called a lamella. So the lamella is basically the solid timber layer which is on top of that plywood structure. So this is solid all the way through, and we've got 5 mil lamella, which is the top section of the timber that's usable over the life of the floor in your house. So on this lamella here, we've only got 2 mil. That's half what we've had on the solid timber. On the one on the other side, we've got 4 mil, which gives you almost the same as what we've got for the solid. We can go up to 6 mil on the lamella. But that actually now can be sanded more times than the solid floor. Big advantage of this being engineered is the fact we haven't got all this timber that we don't really need beneath this top lamella, because that bottom section of the floor, which is the mass of the timber, is the thing that causes us a problem with the expansion and contraction. We don't need all this beneath it, unless you really want to just have solid timber because you've got solid timber. So it's not a myth. If you want solid timber, you should have solid timber, and I would have solid timber with every new house that I ever built. And the main reason is you don't get any two pieces the same with the lengths. Any engineered floor, whether it's a good quality, and we're talking about different profiles, this is a tongue and groove, just the same as the solid timber. It's got a tongue and groove profile, which is what we're looking at there. This one here is a tongue and groove. That one on the right-hand side is what they call a Valinge profile. Okay, so the Valinge profile there is designed to fit together, and we'll come on to the topic of talking about floating floor a bit later, but that gives you the ability to float it rather than glue it down. We'll come on to the advantages and disadvantages of that, but the floating floor concept is what makes it an inferior floor, in my opinion, because you don't have any longevity from it. People think this is where they're a bit naughty in some of the carpet shops, because you'll go away from the carpet shop with this sample, knowing and being told this formula of timber can be sanded once or twice. And they haven't told you a lot. It can be sanded once or twice. However, if you don't glue it and secure it down, when you try and sand this floor, well, a 100 kilo sanding machine going over and vibrating the hell out of it to try and sand off the top surface so you can reapply a new coat. That vibration will put a lovely ripple all the way over the floor after it's been sanded. So they haven't told you anything that's wrong, they just haven't given you full information. So if you don't secure it, that vibration will mean you can't really sand it successfully in the future. So hence the tongue and groove profile, the Valinge profile. Now the top one I haven't mentioned yet, that's the traditional engineered floor that everybody refers to and thinks engineered floors, I don't want that rubbish in my house, I want a proper timber floor. And this is what they're really referring to, because this is an engineered floor with a very thin veneer of timber. This is 0.6 of a millimetre. So it has no ability to be sanded. Whether you glue it down or you don't glue it down, you float it, there's no point in gluing this down because it has no longevity to be re-sanded in the future. It has no sanding capabilities. Very hard wearing, great commercially, very inexpensive, and suits the purpose. If you've got a 20 million house, you probably wouldn't put that in your house. So it's all relative to budget as well. Yeah? So a little unit, if there was a holiday place, suits the purpose, hey, go for it. It's a good product. It's not right for everybody, it depends what you're trying to achieve. Let's come into the metal strips later because that's what's involved, the expansion aspects of the engineered floors. Okay, so that's basically how it's changed with the industry, improving the way that they make the engineered floors and giving you different profiles to suit those different applications. So parquetry can be solid parquetry, or again can be engineered with again a 6 mil timber on the top, so the same longevity, can still be sanded. nicely done with a tongue and groove. The chevron parquetry, so that will go 45 degrees. The other one on the image there is a 90-degree parquetry, which is called herringbone, when it's called chevron. But when it's engineered or solid, it can be raw, and then it's finished on site, or it can come ready finished and pre-finished, it just goes in and glued, and that's it, job done. Okay, so I mentioned that floors are now installed after lock-up, which means we need expansion joints, which we'll come on to now. It's mean there is a more exacting science on it, because we know in the timber industry that the timber is going to move, and we know scientifically by through history as to how much it moves. And we also know it moves differently in different climates, and it moves differently in different species. So there's quite a science involved, which is hopefully why people and companies like us exist in the industry, to help people make sure they make the right choices with their flooring. Okay, so engineered or solid, nothing like the real thing. I mean, as I told you, I would go with solid timber every minute of the day. But there's some really good quality engineered floors now around. So beautiful solid gum floor. Those of you who recognise it, that's the RSL in roof store. Hard wearing, durable, a lovely solid gum floor. That's also a solid gum floor. Lovely home with a solid gum floor. Anybody tell me which one was solid and which one was engineered? Because one's engineered and one's solid. Sorry, that one is the solid one. Yeah. And the main reason you pick it up is the fact that you get all the different end joints are all completely random, because they are never two pieces the same. With a solid pack of timber, we do, most of the floors we do are between 150 and 300 square meters. So when they deliver the packs of timber, there's 500 linear meters in every pack, and there's not one piece the same length in every pack. They're completely random. So from a purist point of view, that's a real timber floor. It doesn't mean the others aren't suitable. That's another engineered floor. So we're talking about a wide engineered floor. It's 260 wide, 6 mm of timber on the top, 15 mm of plywood. So although it's 260 wide, and you have a solid piece of timber in Queensland this wide, it will never stay flat. Forget how good the glue is, it won't stay flat, because it will want to move. So not wide boards, but engineered floors are definitely the go. And those are 2.2 meters long, so they're good lengths, but there's some repetition of those lengths. But if you pay a high premium, you can go up to get even 3-4 meter lengths, even in an engineered floor. So no longer are we going to Bunnings and buying a meter long pack and taking it home and clicking it together. These are real alternatives that can be installed in generally on a proper timber floor. Have the same longevity, but it has the stability, which is the key word in Queensland, and from the industry's point of view, to ensure the flat floors stay stable in the living environment that we enjoy living in. So multi-layered, cross-banded plywood, everybody knows what that means with the plywood being cross-banded. It's not a lump of chipboard that absorbs moisture. Because it's made out of plywood and each veneer is cross-banded, which means it's opposite perpendicular to each other, that security, that stability is really given the importance it should have. There are products around like this, which is sold as solid timber, even though you can see by the end it's actually 3 layers of timber. So you've got solid timber on the top, solid timber laid perpendicular in the middle, and solid timber laid the same way as a balancing on the bottom. The problem is that, and it's sold as solid timber, even though it's not, it has the same problems as solid timber. We're now introducing the same amount of timber again. It's going to want to move, because that's going to take and dig off the moisture, expand and contract that we're having to manage. So you've got a wide board in solid timber, can be more of an issue in our climate. Okay, so installed traditionally, which is what we mean is it's glued, it's secret nailed, and be sand in the future. It's exactly as you would do a solid 8-19 solid timber floor, in the same way. And that's the metal word I introduced you to earlier. It's just put in there as a real layer of solid timber. It's not just a veneer. And the mallet allows for the sanding of the floor. Like we said, the stability is the real advantage. Pre-finished generally, the engineered floors all come pre-finished. but they are starting to introduce ones that are coming in raw. So polygon floor, engineered plywood, solid timber on the top. It's coming in raw because it's that wider board. The builders are finding that the phone calls they get from everybody that they build a house for, my floor is moving, it's got a problem, it's doing whatever. That's starting to upset the builders to a degree where engineered floors, even they're considering using them. And that's only changed in the last 5 years, where they're becoming much more acute in the advantages of having a stable floor, but they don't want it to be pre-finished. Because it's pre-finished, it goes in during construction, they've got to worry about it getting damaged while the rest of the trades are marching through doing their tiling and whatever else they're doing. And the poor electrician walks across with his belt bag on, the hammer drops off and damages the floor. Didn't mean to, it happens, accident. So they're worried to death about the liability of having to protect that floor that you paid for and love your floor, because so it needs to go in late during the construction. Where a raw engineered floor or raw solid floor goes in early and the whole thing gets finished at the end when everyone's finished. So a whole different mindset for the builder to manage if you want to have an engineered floor that's pre-finished. Floating floor changes the whole concept. And the reason it changes the whole concept is because what I spoke about earlier is the fact it has no ability to be sanded, but also you have some lovely metal things that go down the middle of the floor to help the expansion. Because you aren't securing it by any form of glue, you can't introduce the lovely cork that we have as our expansion, generally the solid timber that we stand and polish over the top of. Because this is a floating floor, it sits on these little bits of foam, you have to have some form of edging device that holds it down and secures it. And also even staircases have these metal clips on to give the nosing format. Where with a solid floor, you can actually do a proper mitre joint, even though it's engineered, you can make a proper nosing out of it and glue it down properly. This one here is a complete nosing rider, all done with an engineered floor. So the acclimatation of it, hygroscopic is what timber is, on the basis of the fact that it is continually moving, expanding. I've lost the mouse. Yeah, great. Okay. That gives you the science behind it, which you don't need to dwell on. I use this a lot for architects for their understanding. That's the concern. We've only got a 40% spread of humidity there, but you can see the rapid change of the size of the board. So a 40% change can be over a millimetre of expansion. This is only on a board this big. So that will expand a millimetre. If you've got 6 metres of those boards, you don't have to be a mathematician to know there's a bit of a problem with the potential movement. Now, if you take that board and make it this wide, in solid timber, 180 wide, you then in magnitude, the percentage of movement will be increased dramatically, because the mass of timber is what we're working with. So that will expand a lot quicker. So that small indication there gives you something, understanding what we're trying to manage when we're talking about the expansion. Cork is generally in the solid timber the one we use as the safest option to manage that. A lot of flooring companies will just put it into your floor and then they'll wonder why it's in your floor. So the reason for this cork is unique in the way it will actually condense and expand back without actually popping up. So if you do leave a gap and put a silicone joint in it, which is we think slightly neater, an option, that will actually squash up and it will squeeze out the silicone that's actually been took to fill the gap, but it will never go back because it will just look a mess. Where the cork will expand and contract as the humidity changes, and it will just be a bit like the overflow in the toilet that goes outside when you've got a problem with the system leaking. It shows like an overflow. But when we go and inspect the floor because it's got a problem, we look for that indicator. So if that cork is 6 mm instead of 12 mm, which is what it should be, we know that floor is under pressure. We have to find where the pressures come from. That could be a leaking pipe underground, it could be a leak from outside, it could be many reasons, but we're looking for that indicator that tells us there is a problem. And then we have to find what is the problem. But first we've got to identify the fact there is a problem. It could be the fact there's nothing wrong with the floor. It's just actually was laid too wet. It was laid inappropriately at the wrong time. It was laid at the wrong time of year, in the wrong moisture capacity for the timber, but also they didn't allow the right gaps or ensure the fact it had the right margins to manage that potential expansion. We're laying timber floors this time of year, we'll leave quite a lot of gaps because we know as soon as summer's here, that floor's going to close up. But if we're laying in the summer, we're going to go the other way around and lay it tight, so we know it's going to dry out in the June, July months. That's the science behind the timber. And if we're laying here, we know roughly what it should be. If we're laying up in Harvey Bay or further north in Kent, it's a whole different set of parameters. We spend a lot of time talking to the BOM and looking at their data over a 10-year cycle to know the average over 10 years, to know what the moisture content of that timber should be in that environment to sit happily. And this is the science that has come in since we started building houses and putting floors in between the walls. When it went to the extension of the building, it didn't matter. None of you even knew that the floor grew in the summer and went back in the winter because it didn't affect anybody. It slid underneath the walls without anybody being affected. As soon as we now put it between a wall, it's either going to find the weakest spot, it's going to come up in the middle, or it's going to push out whatever's in its way.
Do you varnish it at the same time as if you have a raw floor, or do you varnish the floor then add the caulk? So then, if there is any movement, it's the sealant isn't being, or the varnish isn't being cracked with caulk.
That doesn't affect. The finish goes after the caulk. So the caulk goes in, the whole floor is finished as one.
So that any movement won't affect the varnish or the sealant over the top of the caulk.
You're talking about a thing called edge bonding, which is another subject.
Oh, I'm just thinking like what you have here, and you'll take the varnish or the sealant right over, and if it's moved, it won't.
The caulk is porous though, so it won't actually affect that.
Okay.
And we're also talking about two different finishes, which we'll come on to later. But where it's a polyurethane finish, it's a plastic, which won't stretch, won't move, you're right, and you get edge bonding with that, which I'll explain as well. But it's a wax finish actually that moves with the floor. So that's another thing we'll come on to. Thanks for the question. Okay, so mentioned it expands at different rates. I also said about the trims on a floating floor. That's an example of what we're looking at for those of you sort of online that can't see what I'm holding up so easily. That on the screen is showing you, excuse me, an intermediate joint, which will go down the middle of the floor. Now we're talking about expansion joints. As per the building code, is required every 6 metres. However, that covers the whole of Australia. Absolutely useless in Queensland. We start asking them questions on the timber flooring every 3 to 4 metres as to where it is, what water sources are close to it. I'm not talking about oceans, I'm talking about rivers and lakes, because that's stagnant water. Yeah, you've got a current, but the water is basically sat there. The ocean is coming in and out, and the breeze from the ocean is taking the moisture away most of the time. I'm not too concerned about the ocean environment. I'm concerned about a lake or a river source where the timber will just draw off the top of it when it's a high humidity day or low mist like we've got today. It will just draw it off like a sponge. And that's after it's been coated. It will still have that level of movement. So it's a big concern. So floating floors, that's the main concern from the aesthetical point of view. But as I say, they have a real purpose when they're appropriate for the style of the building or the house or their application. This is something I'm a real bugbear with because I really don't understand why the builder can't put the flooring in and then put the skirts down afterwards. It's not that hard. You know, as a carpenter myself, that is not that hard. However, they chose to put the beautiful floor in, which is an expensive house. It's a $1.5 million home. They put the floor in, beautiful wide flooring, nice wide boards, expensive, beautiful. And then they virtually covered the whole of the skirting up by putting in these moulds around the outside to cover the expansion around the perimeter. Skirting should do that. So it's that. And spoils the whole, for us, the whole feel. I go into showrooms and look at that, but everybody else going to the showroom looks at a beautiful kitchen and a lovely bathroom, and this is beautiful. Oh, it's lovely, I want to live here. The detail they missed was the quality of the detail that the builder didn't take the time to do properly. That may not be the builder's fault, may not be the designer's fault, but someone actually should take responsibility for doing it properly. So when you have a renovation, skirts come off, flooring goes down, and then they go back up. We put new ones on. You don't just put an ugly mould around. If they're big, some of the old English houses have got great things of tall skirting, so it could be an old house that might be better than to leave the skirting in place. Put another skirt on top of it and make a proper job of it so it moulds down. A lot of the old English houses were built with those double mouldings, and that's not a bad thing. If that age of house, it looks great. But don't just put a quad mould around because it just looks, yeah, amateur. Pressure. This is the big thing we're on about, and how we manage this pressure. So when the floor comes under pressure, this is what I'm talking about. I spoke to you about earlier about the profile and about what we call the tolerance here. So you've got the top shoulder is tight, the bottom shoulder's got a relief on it, so that's not touching. However, when it comes under pressure and it does touch, that's what's happened with peaking. Okay, so the bottom shoulder is now closed, which it shouldn't have been. It's just forced that bump on the top of the floor. So that's what you get into peaking. So that's the physical action of the individual piece of the timber. What it looks like on a complete floor is that. Now, most of you will see that in some of the houses that have been done that haven't got cork in the appropriate places, and that's what people are trying to avoid. I won't have timber floor anymore in my house because I don't want that peaking. Well, you don't have to have a peaking, it just needs to be installed correctly. All timber will carry on moving. As you said, it will continue to live and it will continue to expand and contract. But it doesn't need to look unsightly. No. You can take it up. You can release the pressure by cutting a joint in and putting a piece of cork in. If you can get in there to cut it, you could cut it and put a piece of cork in, and then eventually the pressure will go off. And then, what you don't want to do is some of the thing, oh, just stand it flat. That's the worst thing you can do. That's what we call cupping. But then peaking, if you get sand that off now and it goes the other way, you then get cranging. So it goes the other way. So you do need to be careful not just to suddenly fix it by a quick sand and make it flat again, because that will go the other way and look equally as ugly.
What effect does glue have on it?
It helps it
To
to not expand. In the old days when we were talking about the platform homes, where the timber is the flooring is the floor, they were nailed to a nice piece of solid timber, and the fibres of the timber grip the nail and held the timber. We now build with these plywood I-beams, whatever they're called, and you might as well nail into weak bits because it holds nothing. So that's why glue has been developed over the years. And we have zero VOC glues, those are concerned about the environment and the chemicals. They're low VOC and zero VOC glues, but that's not the drama. But the glue is important, the fact it will hold and reduce the amount of expansion, but it's elasticated. So it stops the floor going up, so it holds it down, but it allows the floor to stay expand and contract as it needs to. So it's a clever compound. Okay, for the pretty bits to the flooring, what they all look like. Okay, there are essentially 5 questions you need to think about with the choice of flooring. The type of species, which is the Australian species, the bush box, the black birch, iron box, etc., etc. The species will give you the colour tone of your floor. That's one of the questions you need to establish, whether you want sort of a black pretty light floor or a dark iron bark floor. Then you need to think about the grading. So the grading is going to be whether you want the natural character in the floor. So if we looked at a select floor, it's a select black brick floor, beautiful floor. Natural variation as you would expect from a proper timber floor, but also you've got a lovely, fairly clean aspect to the actual texture of the timber on the surface. So that's what we call a select grade. Standard grade, you'll start to now introduce some of the natural imperfections, which is as the trees grow and the boards have got in and done their magic. That's a traditional sort of appearance of a standard grade floor. And I always say to people, don't have standard grade to save $1,000 on your floor, have it because you like it. If you like it, if people sit either side of the fence here, if you get people to come in and say, oh, I just want those lovely features, then they're a feature standard grade type person. They come in and say, I don't want those defects. So you're either a defects or a features person, you either like it or you don't like it. So cost-wise, really shouldn't come into it, because if you're going to spend $30,000, $40,000 on your floor, then $1,000 to go from select grade to standard grade is really not really a consideration. It's because you like it. Go to the other extreme, okay, the feature grade floor. Okay, so now you are getting into some serious amount of character, but it's because you really do like it. And it looks great in the right floors. Very forgiving with kids, because when kids damage the floor, you can soon make it into another black mark. Okay, so the other 5 questions. So the species and colour groups. So the colour groups we're looking at now, light has been developed because we brought French oak into Australia. So before we only had blondes and reds and browns. Now we have the lighter tones, which are these sort of oaky colours, which are not these yellow sort of potential colours. So if you take the raw oak timber, which is that is raw timber. As soon as you coat that, it's going to go this lovely golden colour, because the tannins in the timber are going to be brought out by that coating. Even if I just wet that, it's going to bring out clear. As soon as you wet that, you're going to get that colour change immediately. So that's what is coming out as the tannins from the timber. Great for making wine, but not good if you want to keep the timber light. So many times over the years we put a floor down and say, right, don't treat it now, don't coat it, just leave it exactly as it is. And of course you can't do that because there's no resistance to all the spillages that happens in normal life. So the light has been invented by the oak, and we have to suppress these tannins in the factory to stop the tannin coming through. Or we have to apply some sort of stain or colouring to stop that yellowing effect happening to maintain that original raw colour. Can be done, can be costly. And the other thing with the French oak is we're going to get all those lovely knots and things in the character of the timber. The people and the trees get very excited when the sun comes out in Europe. I know we get used to it here, but over there, they really do get excited. And the trees get excited and throw out lots of branches. And you get branches, you get knots. And that's the whole character of the French oak appearance. Our trees grow 24/7, the same speed. You don't get that level of knots and things because you just don't, because they grow the same density, very hard. And that density is achieved by that constant growing at the same speed. It's not the stop and start growing that happens in Europe. And that's the art gallery in Brisbane, black brick floor, laid 8 years ago. If you want to go and check it out. That's an ironbark floor. There's not many brown floors. We'll come on to roasting later to try and achieve the colour, but brown is not a great colour to choose in the Australian species because there's not many brown trees. There's a lot of reds, there's a lot